Hello, my Banda crew, and welcome back to the N.Sane Bandicoot PodCrash with your hosts, Tom and.
Jerry?
One of these days, you're actually going to say your name. This is season 2, episode 4, and Mr. JB Long still has not introduced himself properly in a single episode.
Yeah. I
So,
mean, I'm
today we're
I'm
going to.
not going to start. So
Yeah, today we're going to talk about game sales in the Crash Bandicoot series,
at least a
amongst
little bit.
amongst other things. But for the
Amongst other
first topic, we're going to be talking about game sales and how it reflects the popularity of the series. I guess you could say.
Yeah, because there's right, I'm just gonna full disclosure. I did not watch the video, so
So this is
if
the
there's a
video we're talking
there's
about
a
is the new lost information that has been resurfaced from Did You Know Gaming about PS2 games.
and so apparently the the radical era Crash stuff and Crash to Insanity and Traveler's Tales Oxford comes up in that. And that's what makes me want to talk about game sales in Crash Bandicoot. And I'm going to just launch off from that, but I want to talk about it broadly. So there's like this belief, and I already put a tweet out about this because it really is all I need to say. But uh, there's like this general belief that the radical era games, especially, like did not sell well, and that's why the series went on ice for 6 years or whatever. Um, which it felt like eons longer than that
Oh
in
my
the
god,
moment.
did
But
it?
but it's already been back longer than it was gone. Technically, I guess if you're just looking at the numbers on the calendar, like year to year, I think
Right.
it actually because Rumble ending, I guess, can like put a pin in the calendar and be like, okay, this is the last thing that came out. So like what February, March of 2024. That's like the last update right now. But point is, um, two things. And I guess I should, before I say my two things about that, I guess I should clarify that unlike most things in life, which I am not qualified to talk about at all, when it comes to Crash Bandicoot in the PS2 era, I'm extremely qualified to talk about it because my mentor in this industry was the executive producer on the Crash Bandicoot series from 2004 through 2010 at Radical Entertainment. So I may have a little bit of inside information about the processes of making those games.
Yeah, just a little
Just a little bit,
nugget.
a little nugget or two. And we are friends to this day. She is, again, like my actual mentor. Like when something big comes up for Summit Sphere, I'll call her up. We'll talk it over. Everything like she's she's referred to me to people in the Crash era as a soft consultant for them and for Crash Landed, which was the last game they were making before it was shelved. I did some narrative documentation, which you helped me with. You were
Yeah.
like my consultant to consult on them. Um, so but I actually wrote the actual document, right? So like I wrote a bunch of shit for them, and I think I did a map for them too of all the locations, like even shit that like they would never bring back, and they shouldn't have brought back. I put on the map, but because she like one of the things that she had asked was like, I just want everything. Like I want you to make a definitive narrative like Bible for us, and like that didn't mean they were gonna like use it as like the word of God or whatever. But I wrote narrative shit for them, uh, and just did like she would say soft consulting. Like they would be like, hey, what do you think about this? How about this? And like that's kind of difficult to do when you're trying to also avoid spoilers, right? But like because I was trying to have my cake and eat it too. So I was like consulting a little bit on this stuff and writing stuff for them at the end there. but I was like, don't tell me anything.
Yeah, you didn't want
Like,
spoilers for the actual story of the
yeah,
game.
don't tell me what you're actually doing, but like this is what I would do, right? Um, so they would, so, and then that became like an actual friendship, and like over the years, like she's helped me both professionally and personally with lots of stuff in life, and I try to keep up with her pretty good. So like I feel like I know pretty well how things went back then. So just the one thing I wanted to dispel is any notion that any of the PlayStation 2 Crash games, whether radical or not, were financial failures, because that's just 100% false. It's completely inaccurate. I don't have figures, but over the years, my understanding was that they basically like could not put any ass into the marketing, and a console Crash game would not do less than 2 million units. So you Twinsanity apparently had a rough start, I'm told, but the action pack thing they did, where it was like, people say there's like different ones, but like the one that I knew was Nitro Kart, Twinsanity, and Tag Team Racing. That over time apparently brought Twinsanity up quite a bit, and I know that the action pack was still being like printed and shipped on discs, like even after Activision took over for a bit. So that was like a big boost, but like none of them did poorly ever. Like, and because they were quote unquote cheap, like I don't want to call them cheap because they weren't cheap, but they weren't like $100 million games, right?
Correct.
So they were like, they, for their budget, for the amount of time they took, they still reviewed pretty well, like sixes, sevens, your occasional eight, and on like some of the more like forgiving outlets, you'd get a nine here and there. But like they were, for the amount of time and money that were going into them, they were reviewing decently. They sold very well for that metric. Tag Team Racing, a former developer has said publicly that it, like at the last time he checked, that it was around three point something. It was nearly 4 million by his check, and I'm sure it went higher because of the action pack and yada yada yada. So like for the amount of money they would put into those games back then, like that's a really good turnaround. So like Crash was reliable. You could do it on these budgets in a year, 2 years, put it out. It was going to sell well. Um, Over the years, we've come to understand that the reason that Crash landed was shit canned was because it was in a bad position at a bad time. Not that they didn't have faith in Crash per se. Um, Honestly, I never asked about any of that after the fact because I always felt like it would be like a sore spot. So I'd love to talk to somebody more about it maybe nowadays, now that the wound is so far in the past. But the general understanding is that, the project just wasn't going well. And like, I think I was told by, not by them, but by somebody else that worked on it, that it was like there was one version of it and then it changed into another version. And there have been some devs that, I think Matt McMuscles did a video on Radical, and like one of the devs was in the comments on that and backed that up and went more into depth on it than I had heard about it. But
You're
just,
talking about Crash Landing.
yeah, Crash Landed. So like that's why that got canceled, because it was not going well. There apparently, according to that developer, weren't a lot of hours in the game for how much money had been sunk into it at that point. But the gist was that like after Mind Over Mutant, Activision more or less kind of apparently just shoved Mind Over Mutant out the door because they were, they merged with Vivendi Universal and Sierra like right as that game was coming out, and they just kind of like shoved it out the door, and then it still did pretty good. Like not as good as Titans, I don't think, and definitely not as good as Tag Team, but still pretty good. And it, so they were like, oh well, okay, so we'll give you 2 years to make your next one, and then Then they greenlit the Crash Team Racing thing that was a spin. So they greenlit the racing game, the companion game to Crash Landed.
They
At the
also
same
had
time,
there was a handheld version they were making as well.
yeah.
So they
So
had
like
the
they had
console,
at
the
least,
handheld, and the companion racing game all being made at the same time.
yeah. So I don't know if people remember what Activision was like in 2009. They weren't greenlighting jack shit. Like they would not do anything that was not going to make a fucking make its money back. So like the idea that the sales were ever what killed it. And I'll be the first to admit that my dumbass was pushing that because like again, after the cancellation, I never asked about Crash Landed's development because I knew that it was, a personal thing that they went through. It was very devastating. I know a lot of people at Radical at the time were like, I've had more than one person who worked at Radical at that time tell me that was like their halcyon days. They were like their favorite team they ever worked at, and just like they had a lot of freedom and all that kind of stuff. So like I know it was a sore spot, so I never really asked about it. Which if I could go back in time, I would have, because I was kind of one of the people being like, oh, they don't think it's going to sell enough. People don't care. We should do petitions and letter campaigns and all this stuff and all that crap. Um, but they it wasn't that they didn't have faith in the brand. They didn't have faith in that particular game coming together in a way that was going to perform, and I guess they cut their losses, right? Which to me, you could have still made the racing game. Like I don't like I granted, I guess it was tied to it and all that, but I think you could have swung that, whether it was based on the same assets or not,
It got repurposed into like a
like a DreamWorks
DreamWorks
game or
kart
something.
racer
Yeah,
or something.
yeah.
But yeah, like
So,
like
but
you said, all the assets were the same. You had the same
yeah, so
bingo
when
dial, and
Landed took the hit, I guess they just said fuck it on that too. I don't think you needed to necessarily, but I don't know much about the thinking there. I'm guessing it was just because it was a companion piece and it was more money that they could save. But the gist is just that none of them were ever financial failures. I don't know that any Crash game ever was because their budgets just weren't ever high. Like
they weren't at
they
a
weren't
risk
cheap.
of losing a
No
lot of
game
money
is cheap.
because
Yeah.
they had less money to spend at the start.
The, yeah, and that's why they would put them out yearly and like have multiple people making them so that they could do that because it was reliable. It could come out and sell well without having to put in these huge marketing budgets. But they had some marketing budget, they had some development budget, and for what it's worth, say what you will about Titans, especially as like a platformer specifically, but like in terms of presentation, production value, audio, atmosphere, things like that, I think it shows that one had more time and money than like some of the other PlayStation 2 era games. And that was just because it was well produced. They like got their 2 years out of their 2 year cycle, whereas something like Twinsanity had some struggles over its development time. Like it had 3.5 years of development, but it like didn't really. You know what I mean? Because they were like stumbling and they had resets and issues, and whereas Titans came out and it pretty much like was rock solid the whole way through. And that's why Activision liked Radical, because that was their reputation. So I feel like that's why Landed got as far in as it did before they chopped its head off, because Radical had been, so reliable up until then on putting something out on time and on budget. Um,
Yeah.
So that no Crash game has ever flopped.
Well, explain
Like,
to the people not in the know why it didn't come out then. If all we're saying is praises towards it, like what was the
well, I
reasoning?
said it a minute ago. Because Crash Landed was a misstep. Like, and this is, I've seen devs talk about it in public, but again, for whatever reason, despite the mentor friend relationship, I after the cancellation, I never talked to them about it again, other than what I already knew. So my understanding is just that production didn't go well. In the middle somewhere, somebody important left, is my understanding, and there was disagreement on what it should be after that point. So I'm going to guess that somebody in creative control left, and that's who they're referring to. I think the comment from that dev on the Matt McMuscles video said that it was the lead designer, and I don't know if that means the lead designer that I always knew about. I forget his last name right now. Chris. He also wrote the dialogue. Okay, so we paused and we looked it up. It's his name was Chris Mitchell. Um, he wrote large parts of Simpsons Hit and Run dialogue, a lot of tag team racing, and I think in Titans and Mind Over Mutant he was the only writer, but he was also like the lead designer. So I don't know if he was in charge of it and left, is what the guy said, but at some point in the middle, and this I know for sure, at some point in the middle there was like a hard reset where they like changed what the game was going to be. I think I'm not going to name the person, but I think it was another mutual friend of mine and yours that told us that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I know, but I didn't know at the time that was why. And
This isn't
granted,
speaking about anything that other people wouldn't know from the trailer. Was this reset before or after the
I don't
whole
know.
Frog Zuka thing?
I genuinely don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I don't know what assets are from what. Somebody a while ago DM'd me some design documents that seemed to be from the version that we saw, like some of the gadgets and stuff, and they managed to leak to somebody else. I don't know if the same person sent it to them. I saw them floating around a while ago. I never told anybody about them because, I mean, I'll just be frank with you. They're kind of like uninteresting in a way
That's
because
why I
it's
said
just
Frog Zuka specifically because I knew that was in the
yeah,
trailer.
yeah. So like they're the because it's just technical stuff, right? It's like spreadsheets and stuff. It's like, oh, this does this much, yada yada, and this shoots this far, and
Yeah.
it's like if you didn't know it was for a Crash Bandicoot game, you maybe wouldn't even know, right?
Yeah.
Because so, but I think I also told the person I wouldn't share it. So somebody else they shared it with, or the person who gave it to them shared it. I
Yeah,
don't
I've
know.
actually reached out to our mutual friend and asked if I could like start making videos about the stuff that we talked about, and they never got back to me.
Yeah. So I'm going to clarify that is not the person you're referring to is not the person I'm referring to as my mentor,
Right, correct.
because I don't want any wires getting crossed here. But um, okay, I'm just going to wrap back to the point. There was Crash Landed got lopped off because apparently there were a lot of development troubles. Um, I would love to see what state it was in when they fucking canned it. But the as far as Crash sales, none of them ever failed. I mean, let me put an asterisk on that. I don't know dick about the handheld games.
Yeah.
So like, if you're talking about like Entranced and
Boom
Huge Adventure
bang.
and Boom Bang, I don't know dick about fuck about those. So like, I'm going to put an asterisk and say no
Console
console
releases.
Crash game has ever flopped.
Right.
Which brings me to the second thing. second thing is that people have it in their head that Crash 4 flopped, and it did not. Like a Toys for Bob dev apparently put it on their LinkedIn recently that it sold 5 million units, and I don't know how long they had that on their LinkedIn. I'm guessing for a bit. And people are like, "Oh yeah, well it's 5 million units over 4 years. That's not a success." I'm like, "Yeah, it
Yeah,
is."
why wouldn't it be?
Like that's how AAA works. You don't make your money back in the fucking first day.
Right.
Like Spider-Man 2 came out and like took multiple months to like go into the fucking green, much less into the black. Like these games cost so much. And Crash 4, this is where I got to be careful because I have heard things, but I haven't heard anything from people who would know firsthand. Crash 4, I'm going to just go out on a limb and say that game didn't cost as much as a Call of Duty costs. So I'm going to just go ahead and say, uh, and there was actually one developer who said publicly that 5 million units out of all the games that he's worked on that don't have Skylanders in the title, 5 million units 5 million units would be the best selling one he's worked on. And I can tell you that guy's worked on some hits. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say Crash 4 not only didn't flop, but was probably a good profiting game. And then we come to everyone's favorite punching bag, Crash Team Rumble.
Crash Team Rumbles killed the series.
Yeah.
Crash Team
So
Rumble, Crash Team Fumble.
so here's the trick. And again, I'm gonna try not to put my foot in my mouth.
Yeah, don't put your foot in your mouth.
My understanding is that, and this is also publicly mentioned by a developer once. My understanding is that the team size for that was like literally at some points like 20 people. And I've heard it like at certain points in between them working on Call of Duty stuff, they would downsize to like an amount of people you can count on your hands just to keep it rolling. And I've seen some portfolio stuff floating around that shows that they worked on it pretty much the whole time. I think they genuinely just were figuring out what it was, and Toys for Bob at one point called it a passion project, and I think that is like the most honest terminology they could use. But what I'm getting at is that did it cost millions of dollars? Yes, but that's why they charged $30 for it, because Crash is a series that makes its money in people buying it once, playing it once, and putting it down. And somewhere in the back of their head, I think Activision knew that, and that's probably why they didn't have faith in it. I think if they had put some marketing into it, which I'll be honest, they did not. I think if they had put some marketing into it and given it a longer tail to try and find its footing, it could have been something. It was never, because apparently some of the budget was caked into Crash 4 because they were in co-development. So I'm
A
guessing
lot
some
of
of
the
that cost.
assets from Rumble come directly from Crash 4.
Yeah. So like it doesn't cost as much as it seems like it did. It still cost a lot of money. It's a AAA video game in 2024, but like I would venture to guess that like in terms of pure financials, it probably made the money that it cost back. Now, did it make enough for them to like have two teams going simultaneously and have Toys for Bob have a burn rate on it and all that? Maybe not. But Toys for Bob is doing their thing with Xbox now that they've spun off, and that's official now. It's not speculative. That's the God's honest truth on twitter.com/Toys for Bob.
What's Twitter? You mean X?
No, I don't mean X because I'm not a fucking asshole. but, but the fucking so they've come out and said it now, and they're like, we're working with Xbox, and people are like, they didn't say Activision, so it can't be Spyro. And I'm like,
I love
oh,
your
ye of naivete.
love that
But
voice.
the point I'm getting at is, if they were going to go off and do that, which is presumably a like $30 to $50 million probably fucking AAA fucking, I don't know, Spyro game, possibly, then I would venture a guess that as a studio that just downsized from 80 to 50, that they probably don't have the fucking people to do two games right now. So like I wouldn't be surprised if like as an indie studio they'll take on some work for hire stuff and like farm some of their designers out and some of their artists out to like make extra cash for the studio. But as far as two full projects, as one of them being a live ops game, I really doubt it. So like I don't think Rumble flopped in the way that people want it to just be like this tremendous fucking failure that made no money. Like I think it probably made its money back, but making its money back wasn't enough. It would have needed to be very, very, very ongoingly profitable, and they didn't have the resources to make a game that was going to be that because they didn't have the resources to put out a consistent churn of content at the scale they would have needed to keep people's attention. Like Rumble seasons were 3 months apart. The content was strewn few and far between, and that's because they didn't have the people to make a bunch of content. And they tried their hardest, but like when you get to a point where you're like, okay, we're laying off a bunch of you, and we're going to spin you off independent, and you will greenlight this game for you to work on our thing, but you only have this many people to do it. It makes sense that they shuttered it. And as much as I hate it, because I'll be honest, I didn't play Rumble very much after season 2, but that's just because, don't hate me, I wasn't really interested in the Spyro season, and like I'm really god awful at competitive games. Like I'm not competitive, but if I'm getting my ass kicked, I feel like shit. So like I don't care about winning. I just really don't want to lose either.
And then
So
when you
like I'm
have
just like,
people chasing you and trolling you,
yeah, and let's be honest, the Crash Team Rumble user base, especially people who played Cortex, you know who the fuck you are. they'll chase your ass down, and I'm just like, leave me the fuck alone. Like, and when I'm playing Crash Bandicoot, I expect to get my ass beat because they're all hard games for the most part. That's Twin Sanity and like some of the PS2 era, probably not as much
Crash
as like
4 is definitely a get good game.
eh,
You say
eh, eh.
because you're good. I gotta get good.
I didn't have to get good though. The problem is people are like, "Oh man, Cortex Castle is a fucking it's gonna beat your ass." And then like the day the game came out, the next day, like the fucking next day, of perfect running it, and I'm like, and the first playthrough, I only died in that level like 20 to 30 times, which does not sound like a little amount. But then I would go online and people would be like, "Oh, I died 160 times. This level kicks ass. It's so hard." And I was like, so like that was all I heard going in was like I didn't get spoiled on what the level was, but people were like, "Oh, the last level's so hard." And then I beat it in like 30 lives, and it only took me about 20 minutes, and I was like, "That's it." So like I didn't have to get good at Crash 4. I just kind of naturally was, probably because I spent all of my life playing shit like Celeste and Super Meat Boy.
That probably
And so
helped you.
I'm like I
Because I
like
know
pummeled
that
right through.
in one of Aaron's videos where he was interviewing one of the dev was like, "Oh, is this game too easy? Am I making the game too
Yeah.
easy?" And it
Yeah,
was
it's a
like,
really
"No, bruh,
that's
it's
that's a
decently hard."
that's a really easy trap to fall in game development. And another the opposite trap that's easy to fall in is you have one tester be like, "This level's too long and hard," and then fucking everybody on your team is like, "We got to change it," knowing when not to change it. Like it's so easy to get caught on negative feedback. Like if you put a demo out, like we put our demo for Anton Blast out, and I'm not going to talk about figures, but we were blown the fuck away by how many people played our fucking demo. Like, I guess that's what happens when you put your demo on a Nintendo live stream.
Yeah.
But like, it was not a low amount of fucking people. Like 6 figures of people downloaded the demo.
That's
Like,
awesome.
just we stopped paying attention to it, so it could be higher now. But like, without getting into it, at least 100,000 people. So, and the reason I'm saying it is to illustrate a point. The vast majority of feedback on that is like positive. And then you'll have like one guy on Twitter who's not even negative really. He's just like, it's not for me. It's the levels are too explorative. There's too much to do in them. And I'm like, and then you'll just sit in your chair and be like, our levels suck. Because like the one guy like, but then like in the background there's like 400 people being like, this game fucking rules, and you're like, and you don't hear it.
Yeah.
But like, but you, so it's like, it's so hard to be neutral. Like that Lou interview on CGE's channel where he's just like, we thought it was going to be too easy. I'm like, I'm sure you did, because when you get used to playing your fucking thing, it's like, well, I mean, this happens to me. Apparently it doesn't happen to everybody. Like, I've heard this from other teams. Like, some people just never get good at their own game, which flabbergasts me. But like, I've seen teams where designers make like super hard games and they don't get good at them. But like the QA guys do. So they're like, okay, it's fine. But so I'm like, but like, that's so easy to fall into, where it's like, oh, it's too easy, or like somebody says it's too
I
hard.
gotta
It's like
just
so hard
say,
to tell.
I would not have, like, you might call me a pansy, but I would not have minded an easy mode in that game in
There is
Crash
one.
4.
There is one. It's the default mode.
No, because you still have to do certain things to get 100% of the level. And that's what I'm saying. To make it
Well, I'm gonna give
100%
you.
achievable for everyone, but then that's just like, get good.
Well, I forget why we're talking about this. The we were talking about the sales.
Yeah, that's what happens in these. We kind of just get on tangents and start talking Crash stuff.
So so this, I don't remember what point we got off of, but the point I was going to make was that it did well. Rumble probably made money. I don't want to say Rumble did well, because I think the definition of doing well would have been being able to sustain both things. And now Toys for Bob are away from Activision, still working with them and Xbox on something. I don't know. But it didn't do well enough that it made sense to do both, right? But
Unfortunately,
unfortunately,
it's
but that
still
being
it's still
said,
existing. Oh, by the way, I'm pausing this.
so it,
Unpaused.
yeah, uh, yeah, we paused, and I said I would know where to fucking start, but I don't. So I'm just gonna go back to the point, just being that it did well enough that it probably made its money back, because I think some of its budget was baked into Crash 4, and what wasn't a bunch, because they weren't even working on it with the full studio's might. And it was a passion project, and I'm sure that means they cut some corners and like did what they could, and obviously asset reuse, but it didn't make enough to keep it going while working on something else. And I think they needed to, especially after the downsizing and the layoffs, which was, I'm not going to talk shit on anybody, but like, a corporation the size of Microsoft needing, quote unquote, needing to lay off 1,900 people just to pop a quarter is kind of fucking stupid. But with Toys for Bob downsizing like 45% or whatever, I am sure it just did not make fucking sense. Now, that said, and this is the point I was making before we paused, that said, I don't think long term that is going to be any indication one way or another towards Crash's future. because Microsoft and Activision seem fairly open-minded on how they're going to deal with those kinds of IP. I think I said on our cast last time that I predict you'll start to see more of these like first and third party big publishers kind of not farm out, but like seek the help of small studios externally with partner funding and things like that to make games in these series happen, because the big companies just aren't going to greenlight anything that doesn't cost a fuckload and make a fuckload 0.25 back, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think you'll start to see that, and then lo and behold, holy shit, they're doing that with Toys for Bob. Crazy. But so like I mean, I'm sure Toys for Bob carries a certain pedigree. I'm sure their game is costing maybe not a fuckload, maybe not a shitload, but surely an assload. Like it's going to cost. It's going to have a budget in the realm of what Toys for Bob is probably used to spending. Maybe just not quite as much, but whatever. Point is, I don't think, because I've heard little whispers around the industry of some of these, especially of first parties, like kind of poking and prodding around, seeing if anybody wants to work on their old crap. So like I have a feeling Microsoft and Activision will do that. And I know within Activision before the merger, there was kind of I don't want to say too much, but like there was like some people at the top thought we should just maybe keep making single player platformer Crash Bandicoot games and not try to reinvent the wheel. And to Toys for Bob's credit, I don't think they ever sought to reinvent the wheel with Crash Team Rumble. I think they just thought Crash could be more than it is. And I think they thought, let's do a spin-off, because Crash does spin-offs. And I think that game just got fucked because it got railroaded for 5 years, and like they kept having to like figure out what they wanted to do with it and all that. But I think the sentiment in Activision was Crash should be Crash. And I think so like I think if there was an opportunity for them to do like a regular ass Crash platformer, I think the sky's the limit for that. Because if if they're doing that other thing, that other platforming thing that I'm not saying they're doing, but I'm heavily implying they're doing, and like certain individuals who are very well connected in that realm have basically flat out said they're doing, and I think those individuals would know. Uh, if they're doing that, which is objectively of the two, um, the slightly less popular thing, then I think they would be willing to find a way to do Crash Bandicoot if there was an opportunity to do it. Now, I don't know if that means it's going to happen any fucking time soon. Hopefully, it doesn't go on another 6-year hiatus.
Ugh.
But I think they know what they've got, and I think they need IP like that, especially right now when they've basically completed the merger, had the big goodwill thing of like we're gonna have union neutrality. We're gonna let them forge their own culture away from the toxicity of Activision and old Blizzard leadership. And we just laid off 2,000 of them, and now we're gonna close Tango and just shooting themselves in the foot 400 fucking times, and they need some goodwill. So like, if they can make games that people want, I think they'll eventually try to do that. But then again, I'm not a fucking corporate businessman, so what the fuck do I know about any of that? So that's that, right? Like I think you'll see over the next couple of years them figure out how to fucking do shit with all the shit they own, because they need it. And I think with the fucking push for non-exclusivity, there's a big opportunity to use stuff that was more popular on other consoles, like things like Spyro and Crash are predominantly PlayStation popular, right? So if you're already shipping your third-party stuff like Bethesda and all that crap is going to start being multi-plat again, and you're putting your and Call of Duty's not going to stop being, then if a Crash game comes out and it sells 8 out of 10 copies on PlayStation, 1 out of the remaining copies on fucking Nintendo Switch, and then that last copy splits 3 ways between 2 PC stores and the fucking Xbox, then it would make sense you would fucking put it everywhere, right?
Right.
So if you've got something that's PlayStation popular and your focus is now on doing multi-platform stuff, it would make sense to me to go out and use that shit. So like I mean they just need it, right? Like if they don't use the stuff they just bought, and let me be clear, Call of Duty and King are gonna go a long way on keeping them in the fucking green, right? Like,
Yeah.
but just because of what it is. But like you need, apparently you can't just profit, you gotta fucking make record profits every quarter. So if they want to like get closer to that, they're gonna have to use more of the shit they fucking bought. They're gonna have to use it smartly. They're gonna have to get it done cheaply so that the ROI is high. And there's no better way to get good ROI than taking the cost out of your own pocket and using your property to let somebody else go take all the risk. So I think you'll start to see like external studios get used a lot, partner investment. Like if investors are like, "Hey, can we use fucking Blinks the Time Sweeper?" if and then Microsoft's just like, "Yeah,
the voice again.
give us a license fee and have at it, brother." Like, there's not a whole lot of, now granted there should be quality control, right? Like I don't
don't want shovelware bullcrap.
Yeah, but like I think licensing and like mid-sized studios and stuff like that is the way forward, and I think on some degree they probably know that. I think all the big companies will start to utilize that once they realize that you're not gonna catch Fortnite. You're never gonna catch Fortnite. Fortnite is on the decline. It's still beating the shit out of everything else. Like I saw this argument that like, oh, people, you can't do big AAA games because people don't buy a game, beat it, and go on to the next game anymore. They pick a forever game. And I'm like, okay, then the logic would not follow to me that we need to fire everybody and stop making games unless we know they're going to be big, fucking huge successes. The logic would follow to me that we should make smaller things and spread the risk out. That's just my fucking thought. Then we can hire more people on more individual projects, spread them out, make them cost less individually. The risk is less high, and we can make more money over time because people buy smaller shit, play it for a weekend, and then buy the next one to sprinkle on top of their fucking forever game. Because I got news for you. If people have a quote-unquote forever game, yours isn't going to be the next one. Because they're still playing the same game forever.
Oh my god.
So like, why is the logic, oh, we can't put money into anything that's not $400 million that may make 600, that may make $1 billion over 15 years slowly as a drip feed. I'm like, we can't do that because we can't do anything but that. We can't do anything but that. I'm like, why?
Okay. Okay. Let's reel it back in. Let's talk about Crash sales.
It's like,
I would like to discuss
I want to say one more thing, and then I'll give you the Crash sales.
Yeah.
One more thing.
One thing.
Just one tiny little thing. Here's the thing. You will hear out of the mouths of the people arguing this that if you can't afford X and Y, you should simply cut it out. You should reduce your expectations. Yada, yada. And people are like, oh, well, you got to have this high of a return on investment. You got to beat the market average. You got to do this. I'm like, you're the one setting the expectations. You are the one who sets the variable. If the variable doesn't work and the math doesn't work, change the fucking math.
Yes.
It's not some fucking ethereal thing that fell out of the fucking sky, out of the hands of God. That is a hard locked rule. You get to set the rules, my brother in Christ. If fucking you can't greenlight anything unless it fucking costs you an arm and a leg and may get you half of the arm back, then change the math so you don't have to fucking make that much back. Like, they're like, oh, but you can't. You got to make profits. You will. Like, I know the economics aren't that simple, right? Like, you have to adjust over time, and you have to spread the risk, and you have to distribute risk. You're like, there are ways to do it. They just don't want to do it because if they might, in a perfect world, make record profits forever. They won't. They're going to have down quarters and quote unquote have to lay people off. Like, it's not going to work out that way. So quit chasing it like a fucking dragon that doesn't fucking exist. Anyways, top 5 Crash Bandicoot games by units. Just intuitively, like, I know you wanted to talk about like the top 5 Crash games by units. Let's talk about units and revenue separately, because by revenue, I'm sure one squeaks above another here and there and yada yada. So let's just talk units, right?
Okay, we'll talk units.
By units sold, as in copies sold, digital and physical, N.Sane Trilogy is the best-selling Crash Bandicoot game by a fucking metric shit mile. Like, I think the next highest Crash game is like almost only 40% of the units sold of N.Sane Trilogy.
So N.Sane Trilogy is
N.Sane Trilogy
by far the most sold Crash game.
By far. Like, not even close. You could fucking put all the other ones together and it would just barely beat N.Sane Trilogy. N.Sane Trilogy, the last public reported figure was 10 million. That was in 2018. I think January of 2019, maybe. It was like it was right after the fucking after the multi-platform release had been out for a few months. But it was before Nitro Fueled came out that they said this. Okay, so the last reported figure was 10 million units. Now, that game is evergreen. It charts in the top 40 like all the fucking time in Europe, especially. It's out on PC. It just came out again this year on fucking Windows Store on PC, even though it's already on PC on Steam. I don't know a number. I heard one person tell me it's like around 14 million. I don't know who it wasn't anybody from Activision, but it's somebody that I know knows people. So I would believe it. I haven't heard a figure. I wouldn't be surprised if it's higher than that.
We just know that it's over 10.
It's over 10. I would feel comfortable placing a bet that it's over 15. Which is flabbergastingly high. Like, that's Nintendo first party units, right? That's a fuckload of units. That's fucking AAA Spider-Man units, right? We're through the looking glass on N.Sane Trilogy. Crash Bandicoot N.Sane Trilogy will make Microsoft money for the rest of our lives.
Bang.
It's an evergreen game that is going to sell an amount of units every year that is worth knowing. Numbers 2 through 5 are...
Oh, I thought you were just going to be like, 2 through 5 are, and just name one game.
No, numbers 2 through 5 are the first 3 PlayStation 1 games and Crash 4.
So the N.Sane Trilogy is 1 through 3, and then the next 4 through 5 are 1, 2, and 3 again.
Well, there's some waffling on Wrath of Cortex, because Wrath of Cortex over the years apparently picked up quite a few sales, and it was a multi-million unit selling game too. So, like, basically what I can tell you is number 1 is without a doubt N.Sane Trilogy. You don't even have to think about it. It will be forever. There will never be a Crash game that beats it because it not only is it evergreen, it has a head start. You will never have another Crash game ever be number one ever again. Period. I don't care how good it is, how much money they put into it. I don't care if it comes out at the same time as the Crash Bandicoot movie and the Crash Bandicoot TV show. I don't care how much ass and marketing it has behind it. They will never beat N.Sane Trilogy because it just had the perfect storm. When Crash 4 came out, when Crash Team Rumble came out, and when Crash on the Run came out, N.Sane Trilogy charted again every time. So every time a Crash game comes out and does well, N.Sane Trilogy also does well and beats that game again. that's how high Crash N.Sane Trilogy is.
That's crazy.
Now, 2 through 5, you have 5 options: Crash 4, Wrath of Cortex, the original trilogy in rotation. Crash 1 is probably a safe bet for number 2. But 3, 4, and 5 are some mixture of Nitro Fueled, 4, Wrath of Cortex, and the other 2 trilogy games. The next highest contender, I think, is Tag Team Racing, which we know from public dev comment was somewhere around 4, probably higher now. Wouldn't be surprised if Tag Team made it into the top 5 because of the action pack. Don't know for certain. And then it kind of cascades down from there because Mind Over Mutant, Titans, they're all around 2 million.
So despite Twinsanity being a cult classic fan favorite,
it's not in the top 5.
It's
I can
not even in the top 5.
Say that. Unless the fucking action pack just did so fucking good that like all 3 of the action pack games beat all 3 of the trilogy games, which would be hard because I know Crash 1 is like 6 million. And then Crash 2 and 3 are up there. Like Crash Tag Team Racing, the original one, is like 1 million, 2 million somewhere. Like then I don't think that those figures are counting the PSN releases. So
wait, what game? You're talking about Tag Team Racing?
The original PlayStation games.
Oh, PSN.
Yeah, and those sales.
I don't know why I thought you said PSP.
Well, they were also on PSP as a PlayStation Classic. That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, I was thinking of the PSP version of CTTR.
No. So, fun fact: CTTR, the fucking PSP version, was a good selling version of that game. Somebody pointed out in a Discord the other day, and they weren't talking to me. I just happened to see it. If you go and you look for like copies of Crash Tag Team Racing, there are physical copies of it with the Activision logo. They printed it for. I didn't fact check that, so I want to say that if it's bullshit, then. But I know they did keep control of it into the digital era, and I do know that the digital download for that was a good selling SKU. So like I said earlier, the action pack also got a print run when Activision was already in charge.
Right.
Because you would see the fucking Crash Bandicoot action pack on GameStop shelves well into like fucking. I was seeing it after they built the new GameStop here, and they built that shit in like 2012. So I was like, why is this still being printed? Why are they still making this? Well, it's because it made a lot of money. People were like, yeah, I'll buy 3 Crash games for 13 or fucking. How much was it? It's like $20 at that point. Like I know there was a good long run where it was $39.99, and it must have fucking made bank on that $39.99 because people were like, "Damn, that's 3 whole Crash games." I'm like, but I have to say, if you fucking look at the top, if you look at the top 10 Crash games, like if you're looking at like internal SKU data. Like where they're looking at actual like units, I wouldn't be shocked if fucking just like the names of the games. I wouldn't be shocked if like number 9 or number 8 was Crash Bandicoot Action Pack, just because it was so prevalent.
That'd be something.
And like it's so weird. Like as a kid, when I would see the Action Pack, I was like, "Oh, it's because those games are old and cheap now." But like, you don't realize, no, they make the shit. It's popular and it'll move. They put all this shit that's they've already got their first run sales out of it, and it's still popular. You put it together, you make a deal out of it. It's like it's a method, you know. And like so, like as a kid, you don't realize that because you're stupid and you don't understand economics and capitalism and all that kind of shit. But yeah, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if that SKU is in the top 10, just specifically Crash Bandicoot Action Pack. Um, but I don't know for a fact. And just like I said, top 5 N.Sane trilogy by leaps and bounds, uh, by at least 100% over the next game. Crash 1, maybe, and then 3, 4, and 5 are like some random mix of like 4 nitro fueled or the
2 and 3.
Or 2 and 3, maybe Wrath of Cortex, depending on how accurate the conventional wisdom is that it took off over time. Because I swear at one point I saw somebody with a reliable figure saying it was around 5 or 6. So if it did have 5 or 6, it would be in the top 5. But if not, then those are your safe bets. Wrath 2, 3, Crash 4, and I feel like Nitro Fueled must have done good units, but I don't actually have figures, so I'm not going to bet on it. Actually,
Yeah.
But I mean, they bought 3 extra seasons out of the sales and popularity of Nitro Fueled, so I'm going to guess it probably did good.
Right.
Um,
They
but
wouldn't.
I just
They
don't.
wouldn't add more if they weren't making profit.
Yeah, so I don't know the units though, so I don't want to like bet on it.
Right.
But that's a good guess for your top 5. Yeah, like I said, you don't have to guess number 1. Like you could be the world's stupidest idiot, and you would know for a fact N.Sane Trilogy was the best selling one. Um, that's why I'll end this on. Gaming industry, buy fewer candles.
Amen. Okay, everyone. Thank you for listening and having a great old time with us. We'll see you in the next one. Have a great night and take care. You gonna say bye?